So let's talk about the internet. Now, obviously, the internet has been around for a pretty long time now, for a few decades, and as it goes more and more, it's becoming an ever more useful tool for us, and as it goes more and more, it becomes more ingrained into our culture, and as such, our children see it more and more, use it more and more. Pretty much for decades now, for as long as the internet has been around, and the more it grows, the more there's a debate on whether children should be using it, if they should be using it, how they should be using it, how the parents should perhaps restrict it. However, now obviously this is a debate that goes on in the West and in America, and this debate has risen in prominence over the last few years because of a bunch of media, I guess, because of a number of media scandals concerning internet violence and internet predators and such, which calls into question the safety of the internet for children. And this debate has become even more heated and I guess popular during the times of COVID-19. It's been found that on average, someone in the West spent about 13 hours a day on their screen during the COVID-19 pandemic, which is obviously a lot. It also includes children. So since children are spending so much time, it might be like, I guess, curious to wonder why perhaps it can be dangerous for them and why perhaps there should be more parental controls, even though everyone's first instinct, at least mine was when I was a kid, that no, I don't want any parental controls, I think I'm like perfectly fine, I'm like responsible, yada yada yada. So obviously, as I mentioned, the world is becoming ever more connected due to the internet, and due to the nature of the internet, it grows more and more and more. And the internet can be a tool that is very useful and can help a lot. However, a lot of things are also quite bad, a lot of pitfalls about it. So let's talk executions. So it is known that in medieval times, there was lots of public executions. You know, people would take criminals and they would chop their head off through guillotines or other means, etc., etc., etc. It is all known as a public event that people would go to. It's kind of like a minor festival, I guess. It's common knowledge, but it's also common knowledge people also brought their children along to view these executions as well. Now today for us it might seem a completely bizarre situation, like what parent in their right mind would bring along the child to see someone get brutally murdered, right? And that's obviously everyone's first instinct. However, what if I told you something similar is actually happening today on the internet and is being helped powered by the internet? The way violence on the internet is portrayed, so it's common knowledge at this point, pretty much every type of violent video you can find on the internet, it's very easy to find. However, it's often portrayed in the media that it's something that's very difficult and I guess very dark, kind of on the dark web that is portrayed by the media. However, what if I told you it actually is in fact much, much easier to find, that it is actually very possible to find it by accident whenever you're scrolling the internet or scrolling through social media and such, you can just find it unrestricted right there. And obviously that can be something that's very traumatic for children. And just to give you a figure on how viral these kind of videos can go, I want to give you a quite famous video of an extremist Islamist militia who beheaded a group of tourists. And this video went on the internet and it gained over 1.5 million views in a number of days. It shows these things are on the ground, they're not something hidden, they're very out there and they're very public to see. And any child can stumble upon it, no matter how young or how much try to show themselves, that's because they don't really know how to protect themselves from the internet in a sense. And obviously, no one wants the children to be traumatized, which is the worst case scenario for these kind of videos, but also no one wants to see their child desensitized to such violence. That's perhaps one of the first reasons why I encourage for more restrictions on parents on the children in terms of internet usage, because they probably want to prevent their children from being exposed to such violent and gruesome acts. And obviously for us, like teenagers and young adults, most people know how to avoid it, but even then, it's kind of hard to avoid it. And for children, again, not everyone who watches them is like a bad person most of the time. It's just like a mixture of morbid curiosity and bad luck, which causes someone to view this video. Then we talk about internet algorithms. So in the last few years, last decade or so, as social media rises to prominence and websites such as Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, etc., become billion-dollar companies that are pretty much the centerpiece of a lot of people's lives. There's been more and more media attention to the algorithms that these businesses use, because that's what they are at the end of the day, businesses. And this was perhaps most prominent at the Senate hearing of Mark Zuckerberg, who was a couple years ago called in to answer questions to the US Senate about the role that Facebook played in the US election, and there were some questions about the algorithm. However, the senators did not really understand how Facebook worked in a sense, so I feel like, in case anyone does not need to know, I think I need to give a very brief, simplistic explanation of the algorithm all these social media sites employ. At the end of the day, they're a business, and they want to keep their users on their sites for as long as possible, so they employ algorithms that basically try to keep them there as long as possible by basically feeding them things they believe they'll like. And so you give them something to suggest based on what they've liked and clicked before. That's basically the purpose of those like features, and this is perhaps most famous on YouTube. Where you click on a video about cooking, and you'll get recommended, say, 10 videos about cooking. Or you click on a video about a TV series and you get recommended 10 clips about TV series. Then it can become something quite malicious, and this has been heavily covered in recent years as well. That's something called the alt-right pipeline. So let's say you click on a video about some right-wing YouTuber, he destroys liberals online, quote unquote, and it's very funny, you find it very funny, you click more and more and more, and you don't even think of it much. Then he goes to his political opinions, and he says something subtle that doesn't really set off any red flags. When people think neo-Nazis, immediately think that they'll start with extreme ideas. They say something subtle, like, oh, do you know that white birth rates in America are actually falling? And then at the end of the day, you click more and more videos, go deeper and deeper and deeper. That's actually how modern day alt-righters and neo-Nazis are formed, through this, I guess, alt-right pipeline. And obviously there's a lot of media coverage, and a lot of teenagers and young adults are aware of this, and so that essentially prevents them from falling into such a pipeline because, knowledge is power, and so since you know how it works, you can kind of like break through the illusion. However, people who are as young as 10 to 12, which is what I'm talking about here, and even younger, they do not know such an algorithm, because that is, that's quite, they just don't know about it. And so they're perhaps even more prone and more vulnerable to falling into this quote-unquote alt-right pipeline. And it's not like they're going to be like the 10-year-old neo-Nazis running around, but it kind of plants the seeds for future radicalization. Obviously, that's very damaging to parents. I don't think anyone wants to see their kid become like a neo-Nazi. And so, that's another reason as to why parents might want to, I guess, monitor the children's internet restriction to prevent something that's happening. Also, it's not that, as I point out, that radicalization is in fact so dangerous and so hard to shake off that lots of experts have said, in fact, the only reason to shake off some radicalization is radicalizing towards a different cause. For example, you take a white supremacist and try to radicalize them towards environmentalism and like get them to, bomb laboratories that concern animals, as an example. And also, however, there's not really any clear-cut solutions despite these problems with the internet, and that's for a number of reasons. Firstly, the parental controls that are on the devices. They are, on first glance, they're very useful. You can monitor the child's screen time, you can monitor what they're seeing, etc., etc., etc. However, it can in fact cause a rift between the child and the parents, as the children can often feel that they're being spied upon and their privacy is being infringed upon, can cause a rift between them and authority and them and their parents. So that's also imperfect, but also a lot of parental controls are in fact flawed. For example, YouTube Kids, as mentioned, YouTube is quite a large offender of this, damaging children to the internet. YouTube Kids is in fact not for kids. A lot of the videos are kind of disguised children's videos. In fact, they're medicine. They can expose these children to the violence that I mentioned previously. And so there is not really any, cookie cutter, solution to this issue. It's the one thing that, because every parent needs to figure out what will work for them and their child. However, what I recommend personally is to create an atmosphere of transparency where the children can talk to their parents about anything that's on the internet and parents can help them deal with it. And as well as perhaps, giving a watchful eye to the kids to help them with, the internet and such. Yeah, thank you.